Hello everyone, and thank you for coming to cook with me. I'm very excited to be doing the 15-minute pasta sauce tonight. The main reason for this one is because I basically see a lot of people buying the other so-called convenient pasta sauces. So while we're waiting for everyone to come online, please do give me the little likes or the little heads up, thumbs up, all the little symbols that you can send me so that I know everyone's online and you can hear me, that we're all going. Hello, John and Katie. Thank you for being online. And let me just organize all this one so you guys can get set up. Okay, so yes, coming back to what I see so commonly for people when it comes to busy households in particular. So you get home 5:30, 6 o'clock, something like that after school sports and all that, and all of a sudden, I don't know what's for dinner, or we haven't thought about it, so we better find something quick. And that's generally when the pasta sauce bottles come out. We can get some pasta on, that's pretty easy to have in the pantry, chuck a bit of mince in there, and then that's dinner. Most of the time kids won't complain about spaghetti bolognese for dinner or just pasta and sauce, so that tends to be a go-to. So the whole purpose of this one tonight, I know it may seem simple to be teaching you a pasta sauce, but I want to teach you how to make it nutritious, how to make it easy, and how to make it such a simple meal that it can become your new go-to every single week, although it'll be different every week slightly. The fact that it's something as far as a skill goes. So again, tonight we're not just doing the pasta sauce. I'm actually going to show you a dairy-free, like a Parmesan cheese, but dairy-free. That's going to take a couple of seconds. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the gluten-free pasta itself, different brands that I recommend or don't recommend. And if that's new to your world of gluten-free is pasta, then this is a starting point. So we're going to touch on all that, as well as a whole bunch of other ideas for other ways that we can use this sauce. It applies to so many other dishes and so many other serving ideas. So we're going to touch on that as well. So lots to cover, even though it seems like a simple recipe, we're going to make you a master of it tonight. So who else have we got? We've got Amanda, we've got Danielle, welcome. Candy, hello, you made it home from work in time, thank you. Okay, so let's jump in. But first of all, I just want to make sure we are starting to practice the other ideas around the whole kitchen prep. So for me, it's not just about the recipe, it's actually about how you function in your kitchen. And that's where the magic's going to come in. That's where we're going to get you loving cooking again. So for me, one of the most important steps is actually the setup. And I have said an acronym for this before, checking with your SIS, as in S-I-S. The first S stands for space. So clearing yourself some space, making sure you've got room to work. The second letter I is for ingredients. So making sure we've got some of our ingredients out, or we actually know that we've got everything that we're going to need, or we know what our substitutions are. The third S is for sinks. Now, that's a little bit of a two-part thing. One is going to be the sink of hot soapy water that you run when you start any food prep session. Even if you're just making breakfast for a few people, you can still run a little small sink of hot soapy water. Not only is that going to save you water, it's also going to help all the times you go back to rinse your fingers along the way. It's going to save you time and energy. The other part of the sinks part of that, just to refresh your memory, is generally a nice big bowl for washing all of our veggies in. So this is going to start out as our veggie washing bowl. We're going to put a little bit of apple cider vinegar or regular white vinegar in there for helping to wash the veggies. And then when we're done, this is going to act as our dishes rinsing bowl before we go into the hot soapy water. Okay, so just making sure everyone's all set up in that respect. On another little note, if you do composting or anything, it's nice to have that bucket or that container handy so we can just wipe everything into the sink. So a few little organization bits before we get going. All right, now keep in mind too your questions throughout the session tonight. I'd like to hear in particular from you why it is that you tend to go back to the convenience sauces. Is it mostly about flavor? Is it mostly about convenience or perceived convenience, or what is your normal go-to for pasta sauces? So I'd really like to have that engagement and that discussion today, because in particular, it doesn't necessarily have to be on pasta, which is something we're going to talk about later, but just wanted to make sure that this is something that can work for you on a regular basis. Okay, now ingredient-wise, if you haven't got everything out, let's start pulling out the zucchini. We're going to need onions, celery, garlic, tomatoes, capsicum, but really you can kind of be pretty flexible with this as well. So you can look in the fridge and have a look to see what is going to be going off or what you would like to use up. I've even been so flexible in this sauce as to put in a bit of broccoli or a bit of cauliflower as well. We've gotten away with, you can do leek, you can do sun-dried tomatoes, whatever you've got on hand. Everything will create a little bit more flavor into it. I can almost hear the mothers out there now going, oh no, there's no way my child's gonna eat that, or there's no way we're gonna do it with that much texture in the sauce. Okay, so that's fair. Just keep in mind that when we're done the sauce, we can blend it all up so that they can't tell the difference. And if all they like to see is red sauce with a little bit of meat chunks in it, we can do that too. And the benefit of accommodating that, but still not letting them win in the sense of not putting the vegetables into the sauce. We want to keep their palates getting used to having more and more vegetable tastes in there. So even if you have to blend them in, that's a good way to start. You can start easy, maybe just doing some carrot. Carrot's quite a sweet ingredient to add in, but please do keep adding these things in, seen or unseen, so that we can continue to develop their palates in a very nutritious, mature way, I guess you could say. Okay, now another quick thing. Tonight, I have called this the 15-minute pasta sauce. When you first learned to tie your shoelaces, it probably didn't take you the 4 seconds that it does now. So because I'm going to be yabbering throughout the whole session to teach you the 15-minute pasta sauce, it's going to take us probably a little bit longer than 15 minutes. But what I am going to do is show you two methods. So I'm going to show you the hand chop method, which is very quick once you get used to it. And then I'm going to show you the food processor method, which is even quicker, especially if you're going to do a larger batch. It doesn't have to be a Thermomix. Any food processor that you've got is going to be great. And especially if you're doing a double batch and you want to have a few bits of extra stuff for lunch tomorrow or to put in the freezer, I would recommend making use of the machinery that you've got. Okay, so I'm going to show you both, show you the difference. And then when we're done, we're going to blend one up and show you that difference as well. So let's get into it. Okay, let's grab out your veggies and start getting whatever we need washed. And while you're doing that, Zoe says hi, yay! Amanda and Zoe are cooking together. Welcome. Oh, I'm so excited. That's great. Zoe is 7, just for everyone who's wondering, and Zoe and Amanda have just recently finished my 8-week program, as a matter of fact. And Zoe's become this little cooking superstar, so cooking and eating superstar. So thank you, Zoe, and thank you for keeping it up with the Cook With Me's with Mum. All right. Now, like I said, very flexible when it comes to this sauce. And the reason why this is such a beneficial recipe to have just so automatic in your mind is because it's so flexible, so it can accommodate whatever you've got in your fridge. And also because we can sneak a lot of nutrition in it, and it can just be really quick and really easy. In terms of the ideas of the other serving things that you can put on as a base, if you're not wanting to have pasta, other options you could do would be mashed potato or any of the other cooked grains or pseudo grains. So something like buckwheat, quinoa. I've had it on rice before. We've done it even just as a lasagna sauce if you've got extra leftovers. Excuse me, even if you were to puree it, you could even turn that into a soup later on. So these very flavorful veggies are going to contribute to many other dishes. So I would encourage you to double the batch every single time you do it, and you'll always find a use for the leftover bits. Now, I've got some fresh parsley here. Dried is perfectly okay, but I'm quite a big fan of fresh herbs, especially when it comes to bringing that extra punchy flavor and nutrition. Now, believe it or not, this poor little herb that gets sidelined to be a garnish that nobody eats is actually one of the top 5 most nutritious vegetables, or sorry, edible foods, flat out, that known to humankind. So this poor little thing per calorie has more nutrition than any of the other food in the top 5, which I think deserves to be eaten. So we're going to use a lot of fresh parsley as well. Okay, now another little key trick or key tip when it comes to building flavor in a sauce like this. I think this is also part of the reason, and I'd love to hear back from you guys on this, part of the reason why we tend to default to adding in one of the packaged sauces, one of the jars of sauces at the end of our dish, or even just as the only thing we add in. Okay, the reason I think most people do that is because of the flavor punch, because that sauce has been cooked down, simmered down, and concentrated in flavor as it cooks. So then by the time you get it in the jar form, you've got this kind of highly concentrated bit of tomato-based flavor. Now, why does tomato bring so much flavor? That's an interesting one. On our tongue, we have different areas that detect different tastes. So sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. So umami is what you'd kind of liken to savory flavor. So it's actually the largest part of the tongue, all the way up through the middle, and there's the least amount of taste buds there, but for some people, that's their main taste profile that they absolutely love, is that savory flavor. So the things that are going to be detected in the savory part of the tongue are things like meat and the glutamates. So hopefully we're getting natural glutamates, not extracted glutamates like monosodium glutamates. That's a totally different ballgame, but that is the part of the tongue that those trigger, which is what makes us want more and more and more of them. So coming back to the natural glutamates in their natural undisturbed forms, those are actually wonderful for the body. They're an amino acid, we need them, and they're found in things like meat, seaweeds, lots of the seafoods, and also, funny enough, most of the ingredients in a pasta sauce. So tomatoes are very high in natural glutamates. Mushrooms are very high in natural glutamates. So that's why these create so much flavor when it comes to a sauce. So if you can at all, incorporate the tomatoes, the mushrooms, to some extent all the other veggies as well, but those are kind of the main flavor secrets when it comes to a sauce. All right, so here we go. Everybody ready to get stuck in here? The first things we're going to start out with are actually going to be the onions and the celery. And on that note, I'll show you a quick little trick here with the celery. So many times when I go into people's kitchens, I see celery that's sitting in the poor little produce drawer of the bottom of the fridge going limp and soggy. And unfortunately, when it goes limp, we start to lose a little bit of nutrition as well. So if you'd like to keep your celery nice and strong, like the bones that it's really good for in our body, then you can leave it in water. So you can leave it just cut up like this in water in a container in the fridge, and it will stay very crisp and delicious for actually quite a long time, for a couple of weeks. So you can keep that. You might want to refresh the water every 4 or so days to keep it fresh, but that's a really great way to store celery, and it makes it a little bit easier for people to go in and grab for a snack as well. Okay, so in a pasta sauce, we don't necessarily need to have the perfect paste that we would eat otherwise like that. So you can grab the top bits if they're not going to be eaten by the others in your household. So we'll grab a bit of celery. And even if you don't like the flavor of celery, by putting a little bit in, we're actually building the flavor profile of the sauce without making it taste like celery. So please try not to omit it, because it does definitely contribute an important flavor when it comes to the building of the sauce. Okay, so we don't need to be too particular when it comes to cutting of any of the ingredients for the pasta sauce, because we are going to be basically mixing it all into a sauce and then potentially blending some of it up at the end anyways. So nothing fancy there. Get the celery happening. Okay, and let's get an onion going. Now, I should have set a timer just when I started that celery. Let's just take a note of that. And let's see how long it takes to do this by hand. If it's something that you are not feeling super confident with, then you definitely can go the food processor option. But I'll show you how much quicker it is with the food processor here when we're done. That being said, if you're only whipping up a batch for 1 or 2 people, it shouldn't take you long by hand. So that's always an option. All right. Now, Mr. Onion, doesn't really matter. Let's make it safe. We can put it flat side down, chop through that a few times. Notice how I'm chopping at the base of the knife, not the tip of the knife. That's going to give you more control with your chop. There we go. And then we'll go the other way. And again, just rough. It doesn't, I mean, it depends on your texture preferences in the sauce. If you are going to blend it at the end anyways, then it really doesn't matter. So whatever that looks like for you, the point is, let's get you nutrition, let's get you flavor, and let's get it to you fast. Now, we're going to take advantage of time being on our side here. So as soon as I get the garlic done, we're going to get that cooking straight away. Save one of those for the other sauce we'll do. And like the Italians, if you want to go traditional, they love a lot of garlic, and I do too. So let's definitely include a lot of garlic in there if that's your favorite. One little note I will say, you might just want to zoom in on this one here quickly. See how we've got the inside of the garlic that's begun to sprout. So pretty soon this would have shot a little sprout out the top for growing the next clove of garlic. Now, there are some chefs, and this is getting very particular, but just so you know, the more this proceeds, that little bit is going to become bitter. So most people will not actually pick up on that in their dish, but if it's something that is of importance to you, or if you're making a dish that's very highlighted on the garlic, very heavy on the garlic, you'd want to cut the clove down in half and just take out that middle bit, just to be sure, just in case that goes a little bit too bitter for your dish. Little tip there. The other thing to note is that garlic is very volatile. So if we put it in the very beginning of the dish, it actually doesn't go as far flavor-wise as putting it in towards the end. So if you'd like your dish to be extremely garlicky, or that nice fresh garlicky flavor, let's put it in towards the end, because instead at the beginning you're going to lose a little bit of that garlic power, if you will. Forgive me, I'm crying because that onion is very strong. Okay, I want to get it away from me and into the pot. Now, this is the perfect timing. As soon as we go to start cooking the sauce, we can also probably get the water boiling for the pasta. So just bear with me. I'm going to take 1 second to explain that one. Even if you're not cooking a large amount of pasta, gluten-free pasta in particular benefits from a large amount of water. So try to choose your larger pot, and we're going to go to probably about the 2/3 mark with water to begin with. And to get the water to boil a little bit quicker, a pinch of salt will bring down the boiling point. So that helps that out. And to prevent the pasta from sticking when we do put it in, you can put a little shot of olive oil in. Okay, that just makes your life a little bit easier. Okay, so let's get that on the boil. And that should be ready by the time our pasta sauce is humming along, especially if I wasn't coaching you through this and you were just cooking it straight off the bat. Okay, that one's happening. Cleaning up as we go, saves our headspace. All right, now another large pot or saucepan, depending on how big of a batch you're making. I'm going to settle for about this size. And into there, because we're not going to be frying anything, we don't have to do the preheating technique. So we can just put the bit of olive oil or butter, whichever you choose, into there with our onions, with our celery, and let's just get that sauteing away while we cut up the other veggies. Now, no, I didn't measure. You can go by feel. I like it a little bit saucier, but that was about what I called for in there. Okay, so onions and celery into there. Again, you can do the garlic now if you like, or you can save it to the end, depending on how much you love it. It doesn't mean it'll be strong and overpowering if you put it in at the end. It just is going to feature it a little bit more by putting it in at the end. Okay. So we'll turn that on. We'll start off probably around 7. Just let that heat up, and we don't need to do anything crazy with it. Basically, the temperature that you select to cook the pasta sauce on is going to be relative to how fast you can chop up the rest of the veggies. So if you're in a really big hurry and you're using the food processor, crank that thing on high, but just remember that you've got it on high and we're going to watch it. Okay? I know a few of you say that you've never actually used the medium or low feature on your stove because everything needs to get done now, and that's perfectly okay. Okay, so we'll choose a couple bits of mushroom. Let's use a little bit of capsicum. So at this point now, we're just chopping to get it into that pot as fast as we can, basically, because the size and the shape of it doesn't so much matter. It's up to your personal taste preference. Okay, so just hack working through that. And I'm going to show you a trick with the mushrooms here in a second. Okay, capsicum's done. Now, trained chefs and purists, close your eyes. Chopping mushrooms. Doesn't matter. Have fun with it. Okay, just keep your fingers out of the way and we'll be all good. Okay, we don't need perfect little mushroom shapes. Just have fun. Bring it all together, go again. This is something that chopping mushrooms is one of the ways you can help teach kids how to use knives in the beginning as well, because everything's out of the way, fingers and everything. There, that's how I like my mushrooms. If you want them a little bit finer, go right ahead. Practice your rock chopping technique or hack away. All right, we've got our mushrooms. Let's get some zucchini in there. I've even got some baby squash. Now these you cannot get all the time, so I'm going to feature them in the dish today. And completely up to you, whatever you've got. So zucchini, again, if you don't like biting into large pieces of zucchini, let's just take a second to make them a little bit smaller. Okay, flat pieces, and then we'll chop through them on the end. There we go, line them up, chop away. So you can imagine if you were doing this the third time over or the fourth time over, it would definitely take you under 15 minutes to pump out this pasta sauce. Very quick. Okay, and we cannot forget a bit of parsley. Oh, yum, love. With parsley, you can use the stalks too. We just need to make sure that they're cut fine enough. Did you notice what I did there? Should have stepped you through it. Anything that's long and skinny that we're cutting, save your cutting time by cutting it in half, doubling it over, and I did it again. So cut it in half, double it back over on itself, and now you get to do a quarter of the chopping that you would have done had it been one long piece. Okay, so we're going to chop through that parsley nice and fine. There we go. Okay. Bit of button squash. Oh, the colors. Look at the colors coming together. This is fun. I wonder if we could even beat the water boiling with our sauce. Let's see how we go. Now, button squash, I know it seems insignificant, even zucchini. There are so many nutritional benefits in all of these foods. So if these are things that you can make regular foods in your diet, even if you go to the markets and you don't know what you're going to use, what you're going to cook with them, just at least try to have them on hand, knowing that you're going to have the Cook With Me recipe coming up and you're going to start learning these skills on how you can just sneak these vegetables in everywhere. Just improve the variety in your diet and all of a sudden your health can improve too. All right, now I don't hear any action happening with the onions yet, so let's go check that out. But otherwise, that's pretty much all the veggies that we're going to be putting into the dish. So at this point, it's kind of only needs to cook down, other than the tomatoes, and then we're going to season it up at the end. And there's our sauce. So easy, so full of nutrition. Let's just get the fine tuning right, okay? Checking on this quickly. Not too much action happening here yet. I'm not cooking with gas. Maybe you've got a faster bit of action there. So check on your bits of onion and celery. Let's let them saute down. So pausing on that, just to show you the contrast or the difference of doing that in the food processor, okay? So equivalent items that we're going to be using. Let's use celery, okay? Get our zucchini ready. Onion. We're going to help out the food processor just a little bit. We don't have to chop it up much, but we want to make sure that it can do an even job of cutting everything up for us. So we're going to give it little bits to work with. Capsicum. And the mushrooms can go in whole. Parsley, because it's a bit stringy, we're going to actually give it a little bit more help with the food processor. A few little chops there. But here we go. So, onions. Let's chuck in that garlic clove as well so we can get that happening. If you do happen to be using a Thermomix, you could also cook it in here as well, obviously, and then puree it at the end. So that actually makes some things easier. But as far as getting all the flavor and all the nutrition, let's let that do a good job of that first. So it doesn't really matter what speed, let's just chop it up. And again, it's just going to come down to whatever texture you prefer. It's probably better, as far as cooking goes, to keep it a little bit chunkier off the start, just so you don't get a lot of that blipping and bubbling up when it cooks. But that's perfectly a good start. And then we can take that out and put that straight into the pan, or we can just chop it all up together knowing it's going to get blended in anyways. And we'll put a few tomatoes in with that one. I've actually been very lucky to get these gorgeous heirloom tomatoes. Organic heirloom tomatoes as well. Those are just looking amazing. I can't wait to use them. Okay, so that's sauteing along. Pop our tomatoes in here. And I'm going to save the pretty little ones for the sauce where we get to see them. I might even put them in whole, and then once they're cooking, we can mash them in at the end. So, okay. Is everyone caught up? Do we have all your bits chopped up ready to go into the pot? Okay, I'm just going to blend this one up one more time. Oh, we forgot the mushrooms. Those are nice and easy. Now, any last little bits that are not quite blended, not a problem at all. We can either take them out and chop them individually or go again. But that's about what we're looking like. So by the time that actually cooks down, it's gonna look pretty delicious. I know it doesn't maybe so much right now. Okay. Now, those onions and celery are cooking down nicely. If you are using mince, if you're going to use a traditional pasta sauce and you're going to put in some beef mince or turkey mince or even kangaroo mince, that can be hidden quite nicely in a pasta sauce. You can put it in now. So with the onions and the celery sauteing down, you can actually add the mince in, fry that off, cook that fairly through before we add the rest of the veggies. So that would go in now. If you've already cooked it in advance, then you can put it in at any time. So not a worry there. All right, into the pot these go. And then, if you want to be cooking it, the fastest method is to start actually by steam cooking it. So we're going to leave the lid on for a bit, and we're going to let the juices and the natural veggie liquid come out as it cooks down. If you're adding whole tomatoes, it will take a little bit longer in order for the juices to come out of them. So a faster version of this sauce, if you are in a hurry, is to cut them in half first. I like biting into some nice kind of semi-whole but shriveled up tomatoes in my sauce. So I'm going to put them in whole, save a bit of time, and save some raw ones as treats later. And then I'm going to pop the lid on and get this happening quite a bit quicker. Okay, so we can leave the heat on about 6 or 7. We'll keep checking it, making sure there's nothing scorching on the bottom. There should be enough liquid. If that does happen, you can add a little bit of stock liquid if you've got your own homemade broth, or even just water. Okay, into this pot, we're going to do the food processor one and show you the difference. So let's get that one warm as well. In this case, because we've blended everything together, not the end of the world, we're just going to let everything cook and simmer down at the same time. So a little bit of our olive oil into that pot, and then we will put all the veggies in. Now, yes, I will fully admit this is blasphemy in terms of a proper Italian pasta sauce, okay? That's okay. What I'm trying to achieve here is healthier food within a busier household so that you don't have to use convenience packaged foods, okay? They're not more convenient in the long run, I promise you. Having the skills and knowing how to create nutritious, healthy foods that's going to nourish your family for the rest of their lives is way more convenient than illness later or anything like that, in my opinion. Not to mention the cost in your pocket and also the cost to the earth of having a lot of that extra packaging and manufacturing and I guess trucks driving everything everywhere. Okay, so let's put that all in. We're going to let that cook down. And again, depending on how big of a batch you make, this will take it a little bit longer than the 15 minutes, but for 3 to 4 people, we can easily punch out a 15-minute pasta sauce. And then we will do all of our flavoring up at the end once we can see how much flavor is going to come from these veggies. So the better quality tomatoes that you can find, the fresher the celery you can find, the more brown the mushrooms even. So if you can get a hold of some shiitake mushrooms, those are delicious flavor in a sauce. So it all comes down to the quality of the produce, I guess, that we're looking for here. A few little bonus chunkies that the food processor didn't deal with. Okay, so lid on that one too. Let's get those cooking down. Two very different look and feel. So again, if you wanted that to be a chunkier sauce using a food processor, process each food group or food item separately so that you can control the chunkiness, and then put it into the pan as you go so you can add the next one in and just do it that way. Very different looks and feels. Again, if you're going to be blending it at the end, it doesn't really matter. Now our pasta water is not quite boiling yet, so glad we started it when we did. Now is a good opportunity for any questions that you guys have. Let's take some questions here and then we can discuss some other ideas for how you would use these particular foods, this sauce. Okay, thank you. How is everyone tracking? As I let those come in, oh, that was fast. All of a sudden the water started boiling. Okay, so at this point, depending on how quickly or how well we've timed things on your side of the kitchen, you can time the pasta if you like. You don't have to be pedantic about it, but time the pasta for about 10 to 12 minutes before you're ready to eat. So we might want to let the sauces catch up a little bit and simmer down before we add the pasta in, but at least the water is boiling. So once it reaches a boil, let's just keep it on a simmer and turn it down to maybe 1 or 2. We can leave the lid on. And just know that most gluten-free pastas will take anywhere from 8 to sort of 15 minutes, I've seen, depending on the type of pasta and how much you have in the pot. Okay, so we've got a bit of action happening here. Let's just give it a little stir. Anything you're going to cook on higher heat, we're just going to need to watch and give it a more regular stir. Now this is a similar concept to any type of, I guess, sauce or dish that you're building in the saucepan as you go, is we kind of build the base flavor based on the vegetables and the other plant-based foods or even meat and dairy first, and then we do our seasoning mostly at the end. Not for every dish, but for the most part we don't add salt till the very end because we want to see what kind of flavor combinations come out of the dish as it's cooked. And that does take time. It does take time for it to simmer. The other thing when we're bringing vegetable and herb flavors together and spices is they'll always taste better the next day. So even if this is something you're not eating tonight and you're building it for tomorrow's lunches or tomorrow's dinner, even better. It'll taste even yummier. Okay, question from Amanda. Do we get a different flavor by cooking off the onion and celery first compared to the Thermomix version? That is a great question. If we were to be very technical, I would say yes. For the sake of getting dinner on the table, probably not too noticeable. It'll be a slightly milder, more balanced flavor if we cook off the celery and the onion first. So totally up to your preference. I'd say most people wouldn't notice, but knowing personally about yourself and little Zoe, maybe it's best to saute the onion and the celery first. And that's also a little preliminary step if you are going to be using meat. Those two kind of come with or before the meat. Cook them first, and then we add the veggies on top. So great question. Okay, now coming to the pasta topic. Those of you that are new to gluten-free pasta, there are two brands that I would start with. One is Ogran. Okay, they make a very good gluten-free pasta. The other one is Bon Tempo. Now, again, I don't make any money from either of these, but I have tried them all. There are a couple of other brands available in bulk that make generally a quinoa and rice-based macaroni or quinoa and rice-based pastas. So there's some in bulk that are quite good. Unfortunately, there's also some brands that are really atrocious when it comes to gluten-free taste. Now, I hesitate to even say anything about those brands because it's not their fault. It's just that if someone were to be brand new to gluten-free food and they were to buy that first, they might be turned off for life. So stick with these as a starting point and feel free to experiment and try other ones as you go. If your palate is a little bit more, dare I say, adult or adventurous, you can even go and try some of the really awesome pastas that are coming out now. There's a mung bean fettuccine, there's a black bean spaghetti, and they're literally just made from those ingredients. So gluten-free and awesome. There's also what's called sweet potato noodles, and they are really good for kids. They are more like a spaghetti noodle, if you will, but they're also called glass noodles, and they're often available in Asian supermarkets or Asian food stores. They are delicious in mostly, I'd use them in a noodle salad and a lot of other dishes as well. So there's lots of options out there in the gluten-free world. If you're brand new to it, start with these ones. Okay, another little stir and a check-in. Looking good. Starting to simmer down. Notice how we're getting the skins of the tomatoes coming off. So in a very traditional pasta sauce, they would actually say to cook the tomatoes separate and to peel off the skin, because the skin will actually present itself in the sauce. It won't actually blend down or reduce down, so you'll feel it, you'll taste it in the sauce. Again, when it comes to getting a healthy dinner on the table for everyone, I tend not to bother, and I try to just really enjoy everything about the sauce. I don't really even notice. But again, for the purists out there, peel your tomatoes. Okay, they're both coming along well now. We've got the food processor one simmering. It's reached a boil now, so we just want to make sure we keep stirring it, letting it reduce down. The smell actually is different between the two of them. So it's interesting. I can't wait to kind of compare the flavors for you and try to describe that, but the smell is different. All right, so gluten-free pasta, let's jump into that one. We'll be a little bit ahead of the sauce at this point, but I also want to have time to show you the dairy-free Parmesan cheese. Okay, so I'm going to choose the rigatoni tonight. And everyone's different, but just for reference, never once have I ever looked at the recommended cooking time on the back of a package, because generally it doesn't go to plan. So I just go by taste, and that's probably what I would recommend as a better way for you to practice, is because then you're developing the skill, and it's also very much more personal, because you might not like it al dente, you might like it a little bit more cooked than that. So we'll bring that back up to a bit of a rumbling boil. The more the water is turning, the less likely the pasta will stick to itself. So we do want that little bit of rumble. And then you can be ready with a pasta spoon. There it is. Ready with your pasta spoon to stir it as we pour in. Okay. Ooh, some left. Okay, so it doesn't matter what shape of pasta that you're choosing. Probably give it a good little stir to begin with so that we don't get anything sticking together. It's mostly important for spaghettis and fettuccinis, but we'll give it a good little stir, and then we can even check back on it again. Probably don't want to put the lid on fully because it'll probably boil over. So we'll let that continue to rumble. You can leave the lid sort of ajar. Those are humming along nicely. All right. Now, while we have everything cooking, let's get the dairy-free Parmesan cheese happening as well. So this one you will need either a blitz blender or a coffee grinder or a food processor for this one. And we want to make sure that the food processor bowl is dry. So if you're using the Thermomix bowl, we want it to be really dry. Otherwise everything gets stuck down the bottom. Now, this one I do not have written down on your recipe. So it's not a magic formula by any means. If you want to write this one down, the rough amounts would be 1/4 cup nuts. My personal favorite for making Parmesan cheese is macadamias. If you don't have macadamias, I'm going to use activated almonds. Cashews are also very good, and so are Brazil nuts. Okay. So roughly 1/4 cup. You really do not need much. This goes a long way. So 1/4 cup of nuts of your choice. 1/4 cup of seeds of your choice. Sesame is probably my favorite. You can also do sunflower seeds. Pepitas are quite a stronger flavor, and chia seeds probably not. So let's stick to sesame or sunflower. Okay, and if you didn't have any seeds, you could add extra cashews in this case, would work, or macadamias. So that's 1/4 cup of nuts, 1/4 cup of seeds, 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast. This brings the Parmesan flavor and also our vitamin Bs. So 1/4 cup of that one. And then approximately 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. But again, this is going to be up to your flavor preferences. So I'll put that one, maybe a little bit more in. So about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And that's it. So now I'm going to go over and basically pulverize this until it looks like Parmesan cheese. Apologies for the noise. And for waiting for my machine. Thermomix, if you're listening, can you please make it a little bit faster and keep up with us? Okay, loud noises. Here we go. Crank it up. Super easy. Then I like to get a jar on hand. So we've got a bit of a Parmesan cheese looking texture there. Obviously, if you're using almonds, you're going to get those little specks of brown from the skin. If you're using macadamias, it's even whiter. So we're just going to put that back into a jar. This will last now in the pantry for a good couple of weeks if it's in a well-sealed jar. And this can be your Parmesan cheese. I sprinkle this on everything from scrambled eggs to pasta to lasagna to Caesar salad. Anything you want a little bit of extra flavor, basically. Okay, so there's our Parmesan cheese. You can get yourself a little step of organization. We'll call that one Parmy. You can even make your Parmesanas, chicken Parmy, schnitzel Parmies out of that one. Parmy cheese with a Z. There we go. If you wanted to write the date on, you could. Not a big deal. You can smell if it's gone rancid. It's not going to harm you. It's just not going to taste amazing either. Okay, so we're going to sprinkle that on when we're done. So let's come back and we'll check on our sauces, but really easy. Let me know if that's something that you have everything on hand for in the pantry to make. If you do, you're doing well and you're getting organized to setting up with your whole food pantry. These are things that you know, could always be on hand in theory for you to whip up a little bit of Parmesan cheese sprinkle. All right, so checking on our sauces, this is looking great. We've got a nice reduction in the sauce. And see how I'm just giving the tomatoes a little bit of a smush down there, kind of like your smashed avo on toast. It's such a hit at the moment. There we go. So that's reducing beautifully. How's this one looking? Okay, so a very different texture. That is absolutely okay. We're going to blend it at the end anyways. And again, different smell. So let's let that continue simmering away. It's got more moisture in it. It's got more liquid in it because we've pulverized the veggies a little bit more. So just depends on your preferences. So at this point, it has reduced enough that we could start tasting it and checking the flavor. Now, this is where the magic happens, and this is where your skill is going to be developed, okay? So when it comes to adjusting flavor, if we want the pasta sauce flavor, some of the quintessential Italian things that you want to cover would be your garlic flavors, basil. If you've got fresh basil, that's amazing. If you've got dried, that's great too. Let's add some of that. If you want it to be a little bit more cheesy, you can actually add cheese on the top at the end, or we can add more nutritional yeast straight into the sauce. That's actually quite a nice way to bring flavor without feeling like you're tasting cheese. It's not quite that strong. Other things, little sneaks that you can do would be if you're adding sun-dried tomatoes or you're adding olives, those are going to bring a lot more flavor and richness into the dish. I'm actually going to add a little bit of olive oil, basically, but not from the olive oil bottle, from the olives that have been spiced with some chilies, garlic, and other herbs. So I'm going to sneak a bit of that oil in because that brings a beautiful flavor to a pasta sauce. Completely not critical. The reason why I'm doing that is because I'm actually really low on tomato paste. So for those of you, and you can see I've called in the recipe for tomato paste at the end, even just 2 to 3 tablespoons is plenty to develop this really nice, rich tomato-y flavor that we're looking for. I'm just going to add a little bit of this as well as the amount of tomato paste that I have left. So there's always a workaround. One of my favorite sayings in the kitchen is there is always a workaround. Oh, we got a few bonus olives in there too. Okay, so notice now we've used up most of the liquid of the sauce, so we're starting to get a little bit of that charring on the bottom. Okay, so now this is your indication that it's either A, done and ready to serve, or we need to add a little bit more liquid in if you like it to be a little bit more saucy. If you want as well, I guess the higher flavor option for this right now would be to take out half of this, quickly puree it in your food processor if that's already dirty, or stick in the stick blender and give it a little bit of a blend so that we create more liquid in that respect. So at this point, normally when I'm at home making a quick little 15-minute pasta, this is when I would serve it. I love it exactly like that. We're going to add that little bit of tomato paste I was talking about before, just for an extra little boost in that natural glutamate flavor we were talking about, the nice richness from the tomato. So we don't need more than a couple of tablespoons. I think one common mistake that a lot of people make is to add far too much tomato paste, and then you just get this really overpowering flavor of tomato. So completely up to you. There we go. Now we have our final little taste. We haven't added any salt yet, so this is going to be the next step to adjust and bring out those last few flavors. So definitely taste as you go, because this is how you learn to develop flavors in the dish. Okay, so some of the things that we're looking for when we do taste a dish, and this is getting a little bit beyond the scope of tonight, is the difference between flavor and taste. They are very different. I'm going to save that possibly for the next session of the Cook With Me. In the meantime, if you feel you've got a nice base of flavor, we test that out by adding the salt quantity. And it'll be might be amazed to see just how much difference the salt can bring. Again, not to taste salty, but to actually just accentuate what the flavor base you've already started building in the dish. Okay. If it does get too hot, you can add a little bit of water to keep that going. All right. It's also a good way to clean out the last bit of the jar. So I'm going to go add a little bit of water to this and then have another taste. So a little bit of water, shake it up, no waste, cleans the jar, gives you a bit more liquid. That's looking awesome. Sign of a good dish is a messy kitchen. Yes, spot on. So the salt just brings out the flavor base that you've spent all that time building. That's just the magic little touching bit at the end. If you want a bit more heat, add some pepper. I'd like a little bit more basil. I haven't put any basil in, so I'd like a little bit of basil, and then I think we're spot on. So we'll sprinkle some dry basil in this case. I would have loved to have fresh. It's not the season. And then we are ready to serve. All right, so calling that one good. I'm going to turn that one right off. This one, you would follow the same process as we just did for this one, okay? It just looks different. So I'm going to let that continue simmering down. It's going to need a little bit longer. It's amazing how much more liquid comes out of it when we food process it. Plus, I probably used a few more tomatoes, okay? But we're going to season that one in the same way as we did the other dish. After a little bit more simmering down. If you want to reduce the moisture faster, leave the lid off. I just want it to cook down a little bit more. We should be good to do our first test of the pasta. Now, this is something that you will get good at as you do the gluten-free pasta. I've actually had a lot of you mums tell me that you were so nervous to do the switch for the family from normal gluten pasta to gluten-free pasta, and that the one night that you got brave enough to do it and didn't say anything, nobody noticed. So that's a good sign. Again, if you're starting with those brands, you should be all right. And as you do this, you'll start to get a feel for whether the pasta's done just when you stir it. So I can tell right now that it's very close. So once it's very close, we're going to have a little taste of that one. And it's purely about texture. Gluten-free pasta will fall apart fairly quickly once it's overdone, but we don't want it to be, well, I don't really like it that al dente. Okay. So I'll probably give that another minute or so, and then that's good. So that gives me time to get out the strainer. So if you've got a pasta strainer, grab that one out now. Hopefully you know where you put it last. Otherwise you can just pour the dish out. There it is. All right, so we'll get that ready. We've already got our our Parmesan cheese ready to go. If you guys have any questions, please do type them in. And then we'll get our pasta bowl ready to serve. Our pasta sauce is ready. And because we packed the pasta sauce full of delicious veggies, we don't really need to do anything else to add veggies on top. But my personal preference is to sprinkle a bit of fresh spinach leaves on top if you like and let them wilt down into the sauce. Oh, love that. Or some fresh herbs. Other than that, super simple, and we're pretty much done. Okay, so a couple more seconds, we'll drain the pasta, serve this up. If you are good there, like I said, let's take a couple more questions. Other ideas as far as serving, okay? This is where some of the, I guess, the magic happens in terms of your efficiency that you gain in the kitchen and the efficiency skills and tricks that you're going to learn doing the Cook With Me's. So when I'm talking efficiency, I'm talking getting more bang for your buck, getting more done in the time between kitchen setup and kitchen dishes. The more we can get done in that space in between, the more efficient you'll become. So by that, generally I mean the easiest way to do that is double batching, triple batching. So if you have a larger pot and you had those couple of extra minutes to cut up a few more veggies, make yourself a double, triple batch. Now, what would you use with that double, triple batch? Definitely lunch tomorrow. Doesn't even have to be over pasta. Sometimes I just have that as is, kind of like a soup. You could have it with, like we talked about before, mashed potatoes, the other grains, the quinoa, the buckwheat, you know, even rice. Could go with rice. As a sauce, you could turn it into a casserole tomorrow. So layering in some veggies into that, or even some lasagna sauce, making a casserole out of it. Again, you could blend it up or turn it into your soup base. So there's so much you can do with this as a flavor base. Basically because it's packed of flavor, packed of nutrition. Let's drain that pasta, call it good, and let's have dinner. Okay, now with gluten-free pasta, again, it can tend to stick like any pasta. So if you don't want it to stick, we would drizzle a little bit of olive oil through it at this point for when it cools. So it's not a big deal while it's still freshly out of the pot, but I'm just going to give it a little drizzle now so that that doesn't stick to itself. And a little toss. We don't want to overmix gluten-free pasta because it is more delicate. It's not made of glue. For those of you that didn't know, gluten is Latin for glue. All right. Quick plating up. Here we go. Some beautiful pasta as our base. I tend to like to go sauce heavy and pasta less. Look at how beautiful that simmered down for us. That is just an awesome, gorgeous sauce. And again, if you don't do texture, we just blend it up. Okay. A little bit of Parmesan cheese on top. And there we have it. Pasta dinner. I'm not even going to bother getting a fork. No, I will. I'll wait. Okay, so how did you guys go? Please, I would love to see your end results. Show me what you've got. That helps me know that A, you're actually keeping up to me and that we're getting dinner on the table as a result of this Cook With Me. So please do share us your photos. You don't have to do it before you eat. You can enjoy it first and then send them, but don't forget to take it. And other than that, I will report back to you on how the difference is in the flavor in that. I just didn't want to take the time to actually flavor them both up the same now. And yes, thank you very much for cooking with me tonight, your 15-minute pasta sauce. Can't wait to hear how you went.